千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Eric Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, without further ado, let's get right back to Tao Te Ching 21. As a recap, the chapter title for 21 is Follow the Tao. That is a literal translation of the Chinese title, where the first character means to follow, and the character in the middle, the second character, is the Tao. And of course, the last character, the one on the right, is the character for chapter. As we discussed previously, this title has special significance. This is where Lao Tzu spells out the Tao metaphor. To follow the Tao is to walk the path. It is to live the best possible life. It's not just about adopting beliefs, rituals. It is about aligning yourself in the right direction, heading toward the right destination. We looked at the totality of the chapter last time. It consists of 17 lines, and we were able to do some analysis to divide it up into 3 sections. Here is the result of that analysis. We have section 1, the introductory section, which starts out talking about the Tao is what the ancient wisest sages, the virtuous sages, it is what they all followed. However, the notion is abstract, it is indistinct, it is unclear. And therefore, Lao Tzu wanted to get into exactly what that is and how we can tell that the Tao is actually there. So the middle section, section 2, is all about that. As you can see in this analysis on section 2, it follows that ABAB structure. So it has 8 lines, which is divided into 4 parts of 2 lines each. And these depict the 4 elements that Lao Tzu wanted to especially highlight for our attention. We were able to cover the first 3, and we ended at the last one, line 12. So to briefly recap what we have discussed, I want to take everyone back to the illustration that serves as our framework for discussion. This is what we used last time to make things a little easier to see, to discuss the ideas from Lao Tzu. So as a reminder, in this slide, on the left-hand side, we have you. You with your senses for physical perception, your mind for rational thoughts, and your heart for intuitive feelings. And just a side comment, intuitive feelings are powerful in their own right. The approach to the Tao is with both rational reasoning as well as intuitive feelings. In the middle, we have a representation of the material world. This middle column is what I call the perceptibles. That is, everything your senses can perceive. It is the natural world, which includes all the living things in it. In the Tao, it is called the myriad of things, 万物. And the myriad of things, in turn, includes all the people out there, like you and me. So, everything in the middle, we can see, we can hear, we can touch. To the right, we have the imperceptibles. These are the things we cannot perceive physically. And I have the symbol of the Tao here. But let me note that the imperceptible things, the intangible things of the world includes a lot more than just Tao concepts that we've been discussing. It's everything that's included in the Tao. And the Tao includes everything in the middle and everything to the left. Being all-inclusive, the Tao encompasses this entire slide and everything beyond the slide. But just to make my point about the things that we do not typically associate with the Tao, but are still imperceptible, the intangible things, concepts, ideas, inspiration, creative notions, those are things that you cannot perceive with the physical senses. When you have them, when you think of them, or when you feel the emotions, you can perceive them yourself internally. Other people cannot see or hear or touch your thoughts. There's also things like physics, mathematics, natural laws. We can express them in writing, like formulas, like calculations on a piece of paper, but the concepts themselves are intangible. So I think that gives everyone a pretty good idea what I mean by the imperceptibles. Of course, the Tao itself cannot be seen, cannot be heard, cannot be touched. It is formless, shapeless, it is invisible, it is soundless. So obviously, someone unfamiliar with the Tao will have a good question here. If it cannot be seen, heard, or touched, how do we know anything about the Tao? That is the answer that Lao Tzu wanted to respond to with this chapter. So Lao Tzu started talking about how there are images or patterns within the Tao. Lao Tzu explains that while we may not be able to see the Tao, we can definitely see patterns reflected everywhere in reality. Those patterns, those images, he calls them the images of the Tao, they come from somewhere. Each pattern is a reflection, and the more we see them, the more we find them easy to recognize. Therefore, back in the early days, at the dawn of the Tao concept, in the prehistoric era, before writing, before history, the ancient sages contemplated their observations of nature. They noted the patterns, and they thought there must be something that gave rise to all the patterns that they could observe. And not being sure what that something was, they called it the Tao, because repeating patterns seemed to be the way of existence. They could tell just by observing. Then, in the second element that Lao Tzu presented, Lao Tzu says, within it, within the Tao, there is substance. Lao Tzu also explained that while the Tao was an empty void, it was also the ultimate source. We can deduce there's something in it that is the origin of everything all around us. That something may not be physical, but it gives rise to everything in the physical universe. This is the origin of all things. And whatever that origin is, we call it the Tao, because continuous, never-ending creation that is happening right now, this creation seems to be the way of the universe. And in the third aspect or element, Lao Tzu also explained that the Tao has an essence. He noted within the Tao there is also essence. As we discussed previously, the character for essence can be further analyzed in two parts. There is the energy, the force, vigor, vitality. So this is associated with energy that is sometimes called Qi, the Qi energy. It's related to that. It is not exactly the same. The contextual meaning and the utilization of the character is a little different, but they are tangential in meaning. Then the question becomes, where does this energy or force come from? What keeps it going? As we observe everything around us, we can also note spirit, spirituality, awareness, sentience. And a lot of it is upon self-reflection. I think, therefore I am. We think, therefore we are. The question is similar. Where does spirit or intelligence come from? We can feel it. We have a direct experience of it. And what if, for all of us, the spirituality that we sense within us and the intelligence that we're self-aware of, that they all come from a greater universal mind? And what if that is the essence of what the Tao truly is? And as the last recap, this is where we ended our discussion last time. This line 12, says, within it. there is faith. This is the line that talks about faith, trust, belief, and confidence within the Tao. From the perspective of the entire world at large, the Tao as the ultimate force or principle is the factor that is orchestrating everything, and it can be counted on to do its part. As an example, we can trust that one season will transition into the next one. We can be confident that the colder days of winter will soon turn into the warmer days of spring. We have faith it will happen. We have this certainty because we believe in the Tao in that sense. And that belief was developed based on observations of nature. And we also bring our reasoning ability into it. So, in other words, we have observed the changing of seasons year after year. And we reason the same cycle will continue to hold for the foreseeable future. It seems reasonable to assume that. And the ability to assume points to sentience or intelligence or awareness. This same idea applies in the same way to all previous three parts that we have talked about. The images or the patterns, the substance or the things, the essence or the energy. These are what we can conclude to be existing within the Tao. So for all three, they're all based on observations and reasoning. So I want to spend some time to talk about those two parts separately, starting with observations. So we went through this line that says within there is image. The images and patterns, like when we see circles everywhere in nature, when we see circles in living our lives, those are part of our observations. Another prominent pattern that we discussed last time are powers of two, like yin and yang is duality, the two. Ba Gua, the 8 trigrams, that's also a power of two. I Ching, the 64 hexagrams, also a power of two. Then we get to substance or things. This can be based on when you and I observe human creativity at work. We can see how people and we ourselves have the ability to create something out of nothing. When you doodle on a piece of paper, when you write something, you bring things from non-existence to existence all the time with your ideas, with your creative flow. And then essence or energy. Well, as we observe the world, whether it's the natural world or the human world, we bear witness to the adaptability and tenacity of life. We can see examples of that, how life can be so versatile and persistent in finding a way. So out of all these observations, we begin to form ideas about the Tao. Then, reasoning. With the images and patterns, that's when we use our minds, rational reasoning, to figure out the circular nature of karma and life events. We figure out pretty quickly, based on experience, that whatever energy we project outward, positive or negative, is going to take a circular path back to us. And then substance or things. This is when we use our minds to think back in time. Everything must have a predecessor. Every child has a parent. And then the parent also has parent, the grandparent. The great grandparents going back many generations, we can see in our minds, we can use our thoughts to figure this out and know that there's some kind of source. And lastly, when it comes to energy, essence, this is when we think about our own consciousness and mindful awareness. This is when we reflect on ourselves, that we're using the mind to think about the mind. So out of this entire process, observation as well as reasoning, we can see that it is entirely within reasonable assumptions to invest faith and credibility in the Tao. Within the Tao, there is faith. It just means we can invest faith and credibility to it. Then we can see how the Tao is not just a concept, it is the ultimate reality. And this is from the previous line. Line 11, its essence is supremely real. Therefore, here's the faith that we have. We have faith that cultivating the Tao will help us manifest our reality, our destiny. This is using the metaphor of walking the path, as we discussed earlier. When we say the Tao will take us to our destiny, it parallels the statement that this path will take us to our destination. The path we are on, we have faith that it is the right path, and it is the best possible path for us. Let me talk about faith for just a moment. When we use the word faith, sometimes what people mean is belief without proof. As in, I have faith in something, possibly religious in nature, or someone, even though I don't have the evidence to back it up. I've decided to just believe because I have faith. So that's a context of using the word faith, belief without proof. Here, it's a little different. The context is believability, credibility based on multiple factors. That is, I can believe in something, the Tao, because of my senses, my observations, my mind, my rationality or reasoning, and my heart. Confirmation by intuition, the resonance with the truth, it just feels right. So, having looked at all this, we can bring all four elements presented by Lao Tzu together as one thing. So we can see the sequence and how the elements reinforce one another. We will walk through all four aspects of the Tao that Lao Tzu presented one by one, starting with images and patterns. So as we heard last time, first we engage our senses. And this helps us note what happens in nature, what happens in the life cycles of animals and plants, plus what happens among people as positive and negative energies circulate among us. Then we use the rational mind as well as intuitive feelings to go beyond what we can sense and come to the realization that within the indistinct and unclear Tao, there is the image of the Tao reflected as patterns everywhere around us. Second, substance and things. We take a closer look at life, procreation, and reproduction. That's engaging our senses to observe the world. Then, engaging the mind and the heart, reasoning and feelings. We think back in time to the origin of the mind, of life, as well as intelligence. We realize there must be a beginning when non-life transitioned to life, inorganic transitioned to organic, which, if we were to contemplate that, something that was not living, like inorganic molecules taking on life, self-replication, that in itself is a stunning miracle. This is a sense of awe felt in the heart. Closer to home, closer to our lives, we can also realize that every birth is no less miraculous. Every human birth, every infant, every newborn is just the reality of miracles staring right at us. So this is in the heart as well. Therefore, all three together, the senses, the mind, the heart, all point to the Tao. There is substance in it to make it the source of everything in this universe. Then, the third factor, essence or energy. So we turn our attention from the birth of living things to how the myriad things live, or what the living things do with the life that they possess. When we make those observations, we see endless wonders. We observe so many things, and we marvel at the versatility, the tenacity of life. We're amazed by how resourceful life can be. And that again is the heart. We also observe our fellow human beings, and we discover they're no less remarkable than all the living things out there. People, human beings, they figure out how to survive, even when facing seemingly impossible odds. Our predecessors, our ancestors, came up with brilliant solutions for everything, from utilizing natural resources to building monuments. So we cannot help but admit the evidence of essence in the Tao. There's definitely spirits and sentience within the Tao. This takes us to the last part where we can tie all three of the above together. Starting again with the senses, having observed nature, the myriad of things, and people, we can see the recurrent patterns, the images reflected in the Tao. We see them everywhere. We see them in all directions. So we know they are quite real. We can see the way life moves forward, driven by some intrinsic force. We cannot see that force directly, but we can definitely see its effects. Therefore, we know the essence or energy is quite real as well. Then, with our mind and hearts, contemplating the origin of the myriad of things and people, we can understand there must be an ultimate source for everything. Even though we cannot physically see the source, reasoning tells us it has to be there. We also bear witness to our own processes of innovations and artistic works. That's creation at the personal level. We can tell the source is real because we know we are real. And we definitely can be a source of creativity. So all of these together, our senses, our mind, our hearts, they present a compelling case that the Tao is something that you and I can believe in. And that belief ends up in the heart. So this concludes our discussion of the four elements presented by Lao Tzu. We're now ready for the next section, which begins with line 13. Line 13 says, from ancient times to the present. We start with the character gu, which is the second character. It means antiquity or ancient times. When Lao Tzu wrote that character, he meant thousands of years before him. And as I mentioned previously, Lao Tzu, writing from his own perspective, was noting the truly ancient origins of the Tao. Lao Tzu was 2,500 years ago already ancient to us, but he was referring to historical times as ancient to him, going back to the real origin of the Tao concept. Then the other key character in this line, Jin, the present. Not the present for us, the present for Lao Tzu, about 2,500 years ago, as I mentioned. So from this, we can tell already that Lao Tzu was not the founder of the Tao. He was someone who summarized Tao teachings that had already existed for many generations before he was born. He did not actually originate or initiate or begin anything. He did not invent any new concepts. He wrote the Tao Te Ching intending only to share what he had learned. So nothing that he wrote was actually new. Everything he wrote was something his predecessors, the ancient masters, came up with, not him. So the Tao, in terms of written history, it was first recorded in history roughly 5,000 years ago. That was the first time that there's some sort of written record about that. But even then, it was already in that writing making references to an even older origin for the Tao. So the true origin of the Tao was in prehistoric times, before the invention of writing. That's what we're dealing with here, something that's truly, truly ancient. Line 14. Line 14 says, its name never departs. Lao Tzu was well aware of the long history of the Tao. How was he aware? Well, he worked as the royal archivist for a king during the Warring States period. In that position, he spent a lot of time studying the ancient scrolls in his care. And I want to share with everyone that it is unfortunate most of the volumes that he had access to were lost to history. This is because the Warring States period came to an end when the various kingdoms were united into the Qin dynasty. This was the first imperial dynasty in the history of ancient China. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of the dynasty, ordered the burning of books that he felt threatened his rule. Historical accounts, specifically, were purged to avoid having scholars compare his rule with the enlightened rulers of the past. We know Lao Tzu has made multiple references to those enlightened sage rulers of the past. Qin Shi Huang did not want anyone to delve into those details. So the only reference we have, the scrolls that Lao Tzu thought that people could get into and read for more details, they're gone. Now, despite that, the name Tao had persisted through the centuries. It is fortunate that the Tao Te Ching itself was already so widespread that even if you were to burn all the copies of the Tao Te Ching, people had committed to memory. So the Tao Te Ching itself could not be destroyed. Regardless, even though Lao Tzu did not know that this purge would come during his lifetime, he expected that the Tao would last well into his future, which is our present. He was right about that because every generation after his time, students studied the Tao. And even now, 2,500 years later, you and I are talking about his teachings. At the time of this writing, Lao Tzu also assumed the volumes that he studied, the scrolls, would be passed on as well. He was unfortunately wrong about that, as I mentioned. All we have is the Tao Te Ching itself. Therefore, it is our duty and calling to keep it going. We have the task to pass the Tao on to future generations, into the future for us, which would be the distant, truly distant future for Lao Tzu. Line 15. Line 15 says, to observe the source of all things. So there's a couple of key characters here. The last two characters, there are two interpretations. I want to make sure that you are aware of both. The first interpretation is the source of all things. So this is the more popular interpretation in the Wang Bi commentary. The second interpretation is the father of all. This follows the nourishing mother of the previous chapter. Just like the mother, the father can serve as the metaphor for the source, the point of origin. This tends to not be a prominent interpretation because everywhere else in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao is depicted as the mother. So either way, the overall meaning is consistent. It is the seed of wisdom, the beginning of wisdom. We can look around and see that creation process happening no matter which way we turn. And as I mentioned, we don't know what it is, but we know it must be there. Also, just to note, when we say all things or the father of all, we're not just talking about any specific location, but everywhere all at once. As an example, when scientists are asked, well, where exactly did the Big Bang occur to begin the universe according to our most proven, latest theories and theoretical models? The answer is that the explosion of the Big Bang occurred everywhere all at once. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Next line, line 16. It says, how do I know the nature of the source? The important thing here when we study the Tao is to always question the teachings. So this question comes from Lao Tzu. How can we be sure the Tao is the source of everything? How can we understand the nature of this ultimate source? There's a few ways that we can tackle this question. One answer is from the Tao Te Ching itself. In chapter 52 of the Tao Te Ching, the idea is presented by Lao Tzu that we know ourselves as the reflection of the source. So when you know yourself, you also know the Tao within yourself. The idea is that we all come from the Tao, so we possess the characteristics of the Tao, like a child inheriting traits from the parents. The better we understand ourselves, the better we understand the Tao, and vice versa. The newborn infant is connected to the nourishing mother. The offspring is connected to the parent. We are connected to the Tao, and it's a two-way street. Specifically, Tao Te Ching 52 says, the world has a beginning. We regard it as the mother of the world. Having its mother, we can know her children. Knowing her children, still holding on to the mother, live without danger all through life. So that passage from 52 sums it up. It starts out by saying that because there is a source for everything, it is regarded as the mother that has given birth to the world and everything in it. Knowing her children, know the mother. And when you are able to understand the mother better, the Tao, you can live without danger all through life, which is basically the way that Lao Tzu expresses living the good life. So this is one way to know the nature of the source by knowing ourselves. But Lao Tzu has a different answer. He has an answer that is very brief, only 2 characters. That is the last line, translated as with this. With this is a literal translation of the 2 characters. The first character is with, the second character is this. It's one of the simplest translations in all of Tao Te Ching. This last line of the chapter is also the most important. Despite the simplicity, although it is only 2 characters, these 2 characters contain a world of meaning. Like much of Tao Te Ching, it is both simple and profound. So what are we talking about here? Knowing this leads to knowing the nature of the source, and the source is the Tao. This is one word that contains a world unto itself. Please note, Lao Tzu makes no attempt to explain what this is. In this particular chapter, or any other chapter, there's a couple of possible reasons for that. Number 1, perhaps Lao Tzu felt that this, quote unquote, should be self-evident. Number 2 possibility, Lao Tzu wanted to leave something for the students to figure out. Perhaps this is a homework assignment. One common explanation is that this, quote unquote, points to the Tao. How do I know the nature of the Tao? With this, the Tao itself. Of course, this explanation is self-referential, meaning it is using the Tao to explain the Tao. And there's even more to this than meets the eyes. So let us explore together the meaning in the many different layers. This can be a reference to this place. When I say this place, the question is, where are you physically and in your life? By looking at it this way, what we're saying is Lao Tzu presents the question, well, how do I know the nature of the source? Answer with this, the vantage point where I am. Having arrived here in my journey, with all that I have experienced and learned about the Tao combined together, that is how I know. So then the question to us is a real question and a good question. Where are you physically and where are you in your life? And I can even say, where are you mentally? Are you fully present? Are you physically here, but mentally somewhere else? In terms of your life, what brought you to this point in your life journey? How is it that you find yourself in this gathering, listening about the Tao, contemplating the Tao, relating to it in terms of your life? And about here, about this place. Question, is this where you expected to be at this point in your life journey? So that is one angle on this. Let's look at another one. This, as in this moment in time. What I mean is the present moment, this instant, right now. So how do I know the nature of the source? With this, the mindful awareness of the present moment. In this instant, I experience reality directly, without intellectual filters, so that I can feel its true nature. Then the question for all of us is similar. Are you fully present in this moment? Do you find yourself dwelling on the past or dreading the future? If so, then your mind is not fully living in the present moment. You may be partially living in the past. That is, you have attachments to some past events, feeling regrets, or clinging to past glories. In a similar way, you can possibly have a mind that is partially living in the future. That is, you may be anxiously waiting, perhaps fearing what may or may not come to pass. Either way, in the Tao, we talk about and practice having present moment awareness. It means being mindful of the richness inherent in every moment in time, including the moment we are now experiencing and enjoying together. It also means when you live mindfully, you regain the freedom from negative emotions that may be coming from regrets of the past or fears of the future. It also means we're able to calm down and deal with the chaos all around us. I think you would agree when I say that this has become especially important of late. Lastly, being mindfully present means you can feel the Tao. You can directly connect to it. The Tao is omnipresent. It is everywhere. Connecting to it is how you know its nature. So this is yet another angle on the question, what is this? Is there more? Yes, there is. This as in this way. When I say this way, I like to ask you to point somewhere and say this way, because that's what I mean. When I say this way, it's pointing to a direction. So in the Zen tradition, one of the most well-known stories is about finger pointing to the moon. The sixth patriarch of the Zen tradition specifically tells or teaches that we should not focus so much on the finger that we end up missing the heavenly glory of the moon that the finger is pointing to. So someone who has studied Zen Buddhism, they will recognize this right away. When you say finger pointing to the moon, they instantly understand. It's about the moon. It's not about the finger. Look at the moon. Do not stare at the finger. In the Tao, it is expressed in a different way. So Lao Tzu would say, words point to the truth, just like the finger points to the moon. Lao Tzu would specifically state that words cannot fully describe the Tao, and therefore do not focus so much on the words that you miss the truth and the wisdom that the words are pointing to. And when we talk about pointing in a direction, it is true. The sages point us in the right direction. Literally, that is the only thing they can do. All they can do for us is to point in the right direction. It will then be up to us to pay attention to what that direction is and make the decision to head that way. And if we were to follow the direction from the sages to head that way, we find ourselves on the path. So that is what this can be pointing to, referring to as well. This as in this path. So we've covered this place where you happen to be at this point in your life, this moment right now, this way, this direction, and now this path. Let me talk about the path for a moment. First, one must be on the path to know the path. What I mean by that is before you actually get to the path, you know it only as a marking on a map. Perhaps the marking is the direction from the sages to set you straight so you know where to go. Another factor is that one must walk the path to understand the path. That is, once you're on the path, you can tell how the path is. You can tell if the map was accurate, the marking, if that was correct. And when you walk the path, before you actually walk it, you just have a rough idea what is ahead of you. There's some part of the path that you can see right in front of you. And then there's also part of the path that is so far ahead, you can't quite see it. But once you start walking the path, you experience it directly with first-hand knowledge. Is it easy to walk? Is it smooth? Is it rough? So it is the same when we talk about walking the path as a metaphor for applying the Tao. Before you apply the Tao is just a bunch of teachings, notions, ideas that sound like they may work in real life. Once you have done the actual application, you gain the experience to know what it is like to live it. So there are perfect parallels from practicing the Tao to walking the path. So we've covered the 4 different angles on this. Is there more? There is one more. There is one. This, as in the one. When I say the one, I'm talking about oneness or unity with all. So there is a saying in an authentic Tao tradition, 道本一体，理无二致. Let me translate that for everyone. What it says, the first part, is the Tao is originally one. The principle cannot be two. This is where we approach the final answer. This is more than this place, this moment, this direction, or this path. This is all of them. It is the oneness that is inclusive of all. That oneness is synonymous with the Tao. Looking at the saying that you see translated here, the Tao is the one thing that contains all things, the great truth that encompasses all truths. Tao is the beginning character of the first part. This saying is 8 characters long, divided into 2 parts of 4 characters each. In the second part, the first character is Li. Li means the underlying principle of the Tao. It too is unified and singular in nature. And that is because there is an essential oneness or unity to reality. There's no division or contradiction. And this is despite the apparent diversity and complexity of the world. In the Tao, separation, isolation are illusory. Underlying reality at a fundamental level of existence is connection and unity. So this is all coming together, aligning with the Taoist concept of returning to the source of origin. It is also aligning with our understanding all of the apparent contradictions or dualities of the world of existence itself. they ultimately resolve into a single unified principle. So now we can wrap it all up. I would like to bring everything we have just talked about here together in one slide. First, the key question. What does Lao Tzu mean by with this? What is this exactly? We have talked about this place. I use the earth to represent this place, but I think everyone is aware I am not just talking about the physical place, but the place you have arrived at in your life, the place that you are at right now in your life journey, your vantage point based on all that you have seen and experienced so far. In addition to this place, we also talked about this, meaning this moment in time. Now, I use a watch to represent time, but let us all keep in mind, no watch, no clock can truly capture the magic of the present moment. What I have talked about before is that when you say now, the present instant slips right by and becomes part of the past. We also talked about this way, meaning this direction, pointing to a particular direction. I'm using the moon to represent a sage pointing to the heavenly Tao. And I want to repeat the admonition from the sage. One should never mistake the finger for the moon. So the meaning we are trying to convey is much more important than the specific words we're using. Lastly, I said this path. I am using a bridge to represent the path because sometimes we need to bridge the gap between the conventional mindset and the Tao paradigm. Indeed, you may know someone who would appreciate you pointing the way to a bridge that would let him or her cross the chasm to get on the path. Together, these symbols you see in front of you, they spell out the message that is hidden in plain view. So scanning from the left to right, what it says is right here, right now, this way to the Tao. And the final answer to the question, what is this? This is the Tao, the oneness or the unity that incorporates everything. What you see here is the saying that, in my opinion, best captures what Lao Tzu is expressing. But the saying is not from Lao Tzu. 无道一以贯之. My Tao is the one that unifies all. Confucius. I know people may be surprised by Confucius here. Some may ask, isn't Confucian teachings different from Tao teachings? That is a bit of distortion when Eastern philosophy comes over to the West. According to legend, Confucius was a student of Lao Tzu. Whether the legend is correct or not, it cannot be denied that Confucius drew from the same Tao teachings that Lao Tzu did, as all of the other sages of his time. They did not think of themselves as different schools. They thought of all of them thought of themselves as disciples of the Tao. This quote from Confucius reflects his deep understanding about the oneness of the Tao. And that is why it is fitting, in my opinion, to have it here as the final answer. Now, I think it makes all the sense in the world when we now turn our attention back to the last words of Lao Tzu in this chapter. How do I know the nature of the source, the nature of the Tao? With the One, the Tao that lives and breathes within me. This concludes our line-by-line discussion of this chapter. We are now ready to do the paraphrase. Our purpose, as always, is to demonstrate understanding by expressing the original in modern language. We begin with section 1, the introductory section, which brings in the Tao, those with great virtues, the masters of antiquity, and that they follow only the Tao, but it is so unclear. Here is the paraphrase I would like to offer for your attention. Whenever sages with great virtues appear in the world, they follow only the Tao. What is this Tao? And how can we come to a better understanding of it? It seems so vague and mysterious. Nothing about it is clear. So that is the paraphrase for part 1. In the second section, Lao Tzu provides the 4 different angles to talk about what we can reason and realize as existing within the Tao. So here is the paraphrase I want to offer for that. The Tao seems nebulous and undefined as a concept. But as we study it and look deeper into it, we can perceive wonders. Within the Tao, we see the image of patterns embedded everywhere in nature. Within the emptiness of its void, we see the infinite potential, the creation of all living things that ultimately come from nothing and nowhere. These are all aspects of its essence, which is incredibly profound and supremely real. This is the Tao in which we all believe. It is the path we follow. And now, finally, the concluding section. From the beginning of time to now, the name of the Tao has remained ever constant. We observe the world and see it at work as the source of everything. How do we better understand its nature? By focusing on the oneness of existence in the present moment. That is the paraphrase for 21. I think you can tell that it lends itself to easier understanding to the modern mind. And lastly, I would like to present the full circle for 21 to bring our discussion to an end. In the last line of Tao Te Ching 21, Lao Tzu talks about knowing the Tao with this. We link this back to the beginning, and we see Lao Tzu describing those great virtues following the Tao. The ancient masters with great virtues follow only the Tao. So when we talk about this, we're referring to us. When we talk about those of the past, it's the great sages of antiquity. So the message is clear. The Tao is not limited to the sages. It is meant for you and me and everyone else. We may think there is a huge difference between ourselves and the great sages of old, forgetting that the way we follow is the same path that they traversed long ago. We are stepping into their footprints. Same path, the one. How do I know the nature of the source? With this. So, with the reiteration of the words of Lao Tzu at the very end, this brings to our discussion of Tao Te Ching 21 to a final conclusion. I want to now provide a summary of what we have talked about, covering the totality of 21. First, the summary of part 1 that we looked at last time. This begins with just thinking about how the Tao, the nature of the Tao, the nature of the source, can be seen in so many aspects of life. Starting with you yourself, the manifestation that is you in the Tao, reflecting the characteristics of the Tao in your very essence. And the awareness that you possess, your intelligence, reflects universal intelligence. We previously also talked about the patterns in your life. There are circular exchanges of karmic energy that we illustrated previously. I think that if we open our eyes, we can see even more circles. We can also look back on our own lives and perceive the changing of seasons within the life that we have lived, the career we have followed. And lastly, I want to emphasize your ability to create, reflecting universal creation. The power, the divine power of creation is actually your birthright It is something that we all possess, and I would encourage everyone to make more use of it. Next, I want to summarize the important points we have covered today. The question raised by Lao Tzu, how do we know? How do we know the Tao is the way? Well, first of all, reflecting on antiquity, the Tao is the most well-worn path of all. What I mean by that is countless cultivators have traversed it throughout history. It is so incredibly ancient, it began before written history, recorded history. As the most traversed, the Tao is also the most proven path of all. And to directly answer the question, how do we know? We know because of this place, right here where we are. This moment, right now, even as we speak. This direction, go this way, pointed by the sage. This path to the Tao. This oneness is what includes all of the above. This Tao within us. So this summarizes the key points of what we have covered today. Now, share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, directlin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the webpage where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can also go directly with a web address, directlin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.